Welcome to the October 27th, 2021 Airport Commission meeting held here at the
Legislative.
What's that?
Legislative.
Legislative building. Allow me to introduce commissioners in attendance. Beth Walsh to my far left, Richard Liberatore to my immediate left, myself, Clayton Raymond, and David Genesi, and ex officio member Steve DiNatale on the far right. Also have Peter Kettle, Airport Commissioner. Members in attendance tonight are from Gale Associates are Matt Karen, Jackie Marks, and Nick Ippolito is live stream. We also have Richard Corley and Mark Bishop. Thank you for coming. We'll get things started. First item on the agenda is previous month's minutes. We haven't had time to look them over, so I'm going to table those minutes until next month's meeting. If we could have do we need a vote to table?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So we're going to table those to next month's meeting. Appreciate it. We also have action items from previous minutes. I have a few things to go over. Just give me a second.
There are none, Rich.
Well, there isn't any written down, yeah.
Why don't we do that all next month? The action items identified.
I mean, the action items are all throughout we can just take it item by item. All the updates are going to be.
Okay, so we don't get lost in the weeds. The only one item I have here is the land access rental from Leominster DPW. They were supposed to have a council meeting on it on September 23rd. I don't know if that meeting ever happened and what came of it. I don't see our solicitor here yet, so we'll write up those action items and go over them at next month's meeting.
I don't believe they did have a meeting because Mark actually asked if he could have a copy of the lease that he needs to get the city to sign. And I believe that came to the attorney today.
From Leominster?
Yes, from
Okay.
Mark Piedmont.
Yeah.
From Leominster DPW.
Thank you. Moving on, correspondence to the commission. We do have some from Carlos Silva, Ipanema Productions. Peter, do you know anything about that?
Yes, I do. If you remember at the last discussion that we had with the FAA wanted to approve anything prior to it going to the Commission, which is a little bit backwards because normally the Commission approves it and then it goes to the FAA. But the FAA feel that strongly about having non-aviation events at the airport that they want to approve them first. So when I received this from Carlos Silva, for the 3 events for 2022, I sent it to George Pantelli at the FAA in Boston, and I'm waiting for a response from him. And you were on copy of that, Chair.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so we'll...
Action item next meeting.
Yes, because these events aren't until next year, so we do have time. Thank you. Gail, review of ongoing work. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. We do have Nick Ippolito. He is on the screen right now. He's going to go over the Runway Reconstruction project before we jump into the master plan, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay, hopefully everyone's doing well tonight. So getting right to the agenda here, project number 1 is the Runway project. As far as the current project status, Kobo did return to the site to perform the additional grounding work that was required. Unfortunately, we've received the test results of those resistance to ground reports, and there are still several facilities at the airport that do not meet the required resistance to ground. So we've submitted the test results to the FAA and to Mass DOT, and we are currently awaiting their, I guess, guidance on how we should proceed. So any corrective actions moving forward might include even more grounding or some other type of grounding system, including a bentonite clay type material that's driven into the ground, and then we ground all of the facilities in that. So once these grounding issues have been rectified, we'll move to close out the project as soon as possible following that. So that is all of the update that I have for the runway. Are there any questions?
Nope.
Okay, easy enough. Thank you, and I'll pass it back over to Matt.
Thank you, Nick.
Sure. So just to provide a brief update on the master plan project, not a whole lot of updates since last time. We reviewed chapters 1 through 3 at the last meeting. Those were provided to the commission for comment, and they have since gone up onto the airport's website to initiate that public review process. So any members of the public who are interested in viewing chapters 1 through 3 of the master plan can certainly find those on the airport's website and submit any comments or questions that you may have. We're working through the forecast, which is chapter 4 right now. That's probably one of the more robust chapters, so it takes a little bit more time to work through, but we anticipate having a draft for consideration to the commission sometime during the month of November, likely within the next couple of weeks. Other updates with the project, we're waiting on the aerial survey from Blue Sky. They had a little bit of a delay due to just some, little bit of work overload, I think, and anticipate having all of their deliverables to us by December 1st. I don't anticipate that that will cause any sort of delays with the project or anything like that. So that's, that's coming up, just waiting on that. And aside from that, just willing to take any questions that the commission may have at this time on the master plan.
Just one item.
Sure.
The public comment period, is there a certain amount of time that it's going to be up on the website? I mean, is it a month or is it?
So the chapters, all of the draft chapters will remain on the airport's website throughout the duration of the master plan process. And then once we get to the point where we're approving and finalizing chapters, at that point in time, the public comment period will end, but they'll be available for comment throughout the period.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? Okay, so moving into the other items then, on page 3 of our update here, I had left the pre-applications that we had submitted to Mass DOT for the backup generator, the fuel tank system modifications, and the hangar door and roof replacements, just until we hear back on the results of those pre-applications. And to date, as far as I know, we haven't received word from Mass DOT on whether the funding would be available for those, so no update on those either. Any questions?
No, but a comment, please, Jackie.
Sure.
Number 4, it says hangar roof replacement. It isn't a replacement, it's a coating.
Oop, apologies, I will make that change.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Can I say something?
You sure can.
Thank you. Nick asked if there were any other questions, and it went beyond me, but now I recall that we have had problems with, as Nick knows, the taxiway lights shutting off when we have inclement weather. And basically there's 2 systems. There's the new system that was done for the airport, for the new runway, and the old system that runs down the unnamed taxiway. The unnamed taxiway, it still has the incandescent lights, whereas the new system has the LED lights, but that has nothing to do with the problem. The problem is the connection. And it was evaluated by COBO and one of their specialists, and they came to the conclusion that the whole system needs to be replaced because it's worn out. It's been down there for maybe 50, 60 years, and it really does need replacing, but there's no funding for that. So if we did it now, it's not part of the runway development, it's after the runway development because it wasn't associated with the work that was involved. So the city of Fitchburg would have to pay for it, and it could be tens, 20s, 30s, 50, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do it. And in discussion with Nick, we thought it was best to leave it as it was because if they do go out, we can reset them. There's a reset system. The biggest problem is that, well, not a problem, we believe the solution is that when we get closer to the paving of the unnamed taxiway, we actually apply at that time to have the new lights put in and make those LED as well and get that part of a grant. Or if somebody deems that it's necessary, like the FAA, then maybe we could get an ASMP grant to do it. But that's the situation we're in at the moment, and I think it's worthy of putting onto the agenda. So, do you want to comment on that, Nick? Are you happy with that explanation?
No, I think you did a great job. I will add this, if the airport would like. I believe we can isolate the old system from what is been installed as part of the runway by running a jumper, perhaps through the ducts that currently run under the apron. That would basically take power away from the unnamed taxiway, so you wouldn't have taxiway lights on that side, but it would increase the reliability of the new infrastructure we've installed. So that's always an option, and I don't think that would be exorbitantly expensive, nowhere near as expensive as replacing the whole system, but you would lose taxiway edge lights along the unnamed taxiway for the time being. Just wanted to throw that out there as an alternative to replacing everything immediately.
Isn't that just as simple as unplugging them? Take it away from the system and just let the LEDs work?
I think rather than, I don't think the issue lies with the lights themselves. I think it's probably the cable that's been in the ground for the 50 or so years. The shielding may be frayed or scuffed up by the rocks in the ground. So you have a fault somewhere in that leg of the circuit. And unfortunately, without knowing exactly where it is, it's hard to fix just that one section, you know?
But they do have the new wiring going up to where the old system was. So couldn't they put a junction box on there and just disconnect it and just keep the LEDs working, which makes the airport a safer place to be?
If you did that, you would have to run a jumper from basically where the new system connects to the old and then where the old system connects to the new. You basically cut off that branch of the circuit, but you do have to get a cable from where the new ends to where it picks up again. Okay. And then depending on the placement, and I'm not sure where they are on that leg of the pavement because we didn't touch that as part of the runway, it may be doable for relatively short money.
Right. I would like to propose that the Commission agrees to that investigation is done, because we really can't have the runway lights switching off if it's raining and there's a plane coming in there, because people are going to get killed. So personally, I believe it's better to have the runway lights, the taxiway lights operating rather than, okay, so the unnamed taxiway lights aren't going to, but the planes have got lights on at that speed to guide themselves down to the hangars. I mean, we've got you in particular, Rich Corley from Skyline Aviation. He has 7 SR-22s that frequent the airport. What would you say to that suggestion? Okay, so over to the Commission.
So first off, David, make sure this is on the minutes so everyone's aware of what's going on. And I'm sorry, you wanted troubleshooting? You wanted to...
Yeah, just an investigation to see if it's possible and what the cost would be to dislocate the old branch from the new branch. Let's get a price.
Okay.
Okay?
So could Gail assist us with that?
Absolutely. We can absolutely assist.
Okay.
And that's not all part of the initial recertification of the airport? I mean, I would have thought that would have been, you know, it's your approach, lights, I mean, everything?
I'll let Nick explain a little bit better, but it is the old taxiway, and that portion of the project was ineligible as part of the runway reconstruction project, which is why it wasn't addressed.
That is correct.
I guess there's a fine line, huh?
With the FAA, yes, there is.
Is this taxiway still going to be in existence in the next airport master plan?
It's being explored as part of the master plan, but yeah, it services all of the existing hangars, so
Yeah.
some form of taxiway or taxi lane needs to still feed into where those hangars are, yes.
Okay.
And if we do get the new 7 to 9 hangars, it's also going to service those brand-new 4,000 plus square feet hangars as well.
Oh, it's the same area?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, let's move forward on getting a quotation to at least investigate what needs to be done and a pricing of.
Do we need to we don't need to make a motion on that, do we? Do we need to make a motion on that?
Yeah, I don't believe so. We're not spending money at this time. We're just instructing. All right, Peter, you backed up, and where were we before that?
Just after Gail. Gail's finished, I believe, Matt?
Yeah, can I just say one quick thing, if everyone's all set on the taxi lane stuff? As most of you probably know, the Massachusetts Airport Management Association held their annual conference in the city of Fitchburg this past Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. It was over at Great Wolf Lodge. And I just want to say, I think Peter and Mayor Di Natale and Deb Silver, Lally, who I don't believe, sorry, she is here. I think you all just did a wonderful job, and I think the city showcased extremely well. And I think that was represented by the number of people that showed up for this conference this year. There was, I think, in excess of 100 people, maybe like 130 people. And I just want to say that I think the city showcased very well, and the conference was a success. So, excellent job.
Thank you.
All right, so Gail is completed, correct? Yeah. Item 5, Fitchburg Pilots Association update.
Yeah, nothing to report at this time.
New business, item 6, lease assignment. Rick Bullock, at last meeting, just to recap for some of the commissioners that weren't here at last month's meeting. Mr. Bullock would like to reassign the remaining portion of his lease, which is approximately 6 years, to Rich Corley. There was questions as concerning how the lease read and whether he could actually do that and whose decision it would be to grant that permission. We've sent the information to the attorney's office and hoping we get some information on that tonight. So I guess we're going to hand this over to Solicitor Pusateri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my memory was that it was a decision on whether or not you guys thought it was a monopoly to allow the subtenant to take occupancy in that. And I thought that that was the only issue. So if there was another outstanding issue, I would definitely need to be refreshed on that. But I thought that the primary issue was, is there or is there not going to be some type of unfair competition or prevention of unfair competition? Peter, can you correct me on that, please?
May I speak?
Yes.
I discussed this with George Pantelli, and there is no such thing in this case.
Okay.
In fact, Mr. Corley, in one of his emails to me, actually relinquished Hangar 10 and put it back to the city.
Okay.
So no, that doesn't actually occur in this case.
Okay.
And because Mr. Bullock had many, many documents to actually develop, to do the changeover, I said, look, I said, the commission basically feels that this is the way to go. And he actually provided those documents that were submitted to myself last week. Rick? Monday of this week. Okay, thank you, which I forwarded to both you, Attorney Pusateri, and also to Chairman Raymond.
Okay.
And basically, he just wants to move ahead, and there's some signing of documents to be done to, you know, on his behalf, to move it over to Skyline Aviation, Mr. Corley. And basically, this meeting is to say, to decide, yes, let's go ahead and do it, and that's all they're waiting for.
Okay. So if I got an email from you on this topic, I didn't see it. I did see the one with the words urgent, urgent, urgent on it, so I was focusing on that
Well,
one.
this is the second urgent one.
If you had if you had 3 urgents
I
on it.
thought that would get your attention,
Yes,
sir.
yes. So I respectfully request that if the commission is inclined to move forward, knowing that we don't have any unfair competition issues, I think that was the thing that I thought
Yep.
was hanging me up last month. I'd be happy to, I could try to commit to getting a good look at those documents in a couple of weeks and then get some response back. I've just, my workload at this point, I've got a number of hearings on my calendar already, so probably by the end of next week, I'll be able to review those. And I don't even know that we would need to, other than approve a new tenant, if the gentlemen themselves have an agreement between themselves, or unless we want to have a new lease done with the new tenant, allow the termination of the current lease and a new lease. But that would be the only other options that we would have.
May I speak?
Sure.
My understanding is that Mr. Bullock has the authority within the lease to actually assign it to
Yes,
somebody else.
That's what we saw.
Yes, and that's
Yep.
it. That's it. And because there's still 6 years to go, nobody else can get involved in it. It's his.
It's his to assign.
Exactly.
Okay. So so the commission's, let me just recap this, then. The commission's only decision, Mr. Kettle, then the commission's only decision is whether or not they are approving the assignment.
That is correct.
That's it.
So are there any commission members that want to comment more?
No, not on this.
Anyone in the audience or anyone else?
Maybe Mr. Bullock would like to.
Mr. Bullock.
I had hoped that we could make the changeover on November 1st, but it sounds as though that's not possible. We submitted all the paperwork that would be required to facilitate that. That can't happen.
So I can address this?
Sure.
So I think if they approve the assignment, as long as the arrangement between you two gentlemen are satisfactory, then you can do it as quickly as you want to. And then your subtenant would be a sublease of some sort. You would still have some liability to the airport commission, but you have assigned obligations and rights to the subtenant, and you would be under the impression, obviously, that he's fulfilling those on your behalf. And if there's a breach, though, there would still seem to be some contractual obligation between you and the airport commission. And then if we wanted to, we could work on an arrangement where we'd have a direct lease with the new tenant if that's something we were interested in doing. But we couldn't do that by the end of this month, for sure.
Yeah, that is something we could put off for the future.
So if we had a new arrangement, you would be completely out and no longer involved at all, no longer have any legal responsibility. Okay.
So I would like to propose a motion to allow Mr. Bullock to reassign his current lease to, in this case, Mr. Corley, for the remainder of his lease, which is about 6 years. So that is a motion on the table. I motion to reassign.
Hey, second that.
Could we have a vote, please? For yea or nay? Yes?
Yay.
You're voting.
Okay.
You're a voting member? Yeah.
All in favor, 4-0.
Oh, you are, but
Mr. Bullock and Rich Corley, I appreciate your patience. I too thought this was going to be a little quicker. I didn't want to make the decision alone to, and I couldn't make the decision alone to allow you to reassign the lease without full commission's approval. So that's why we ended up waiting another 30 days. Thank you.
One more question, hangar 10. So what's the next step on that, and when does the city take over hangar 10, and how do I uninvolve myself?
Is there a lease
it's a
on
great
that
question.
property?
Excuse me?
Is there a written lease, or is it at will?
It's tenant at will,
It's at will?
yes.
Can I respond to the
Yeah, please.
question?
Yes.
Did you send a notice that you intended to quit your tenancy at will? At what, when did you send that in, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Did you give us to the end of the next rental period, which would be the end of next month? And will you give us to the end of the next rental period is typically, that would be the end of next month? That would typically be what I would expect for a notice to quit for, we could work on it shorter if it was a really emergency, but we appreciate having a month to month. Thank you.
Just one thing.
One
sorry.
second. Mr. Bullock.
I submitted to Mr. Kettle 2 documents. One is the assignment lease, the other is the city's signing off on. Is that passed muster so that we can sit down with you and execute work?
They were forwarded to the attorney and also to the chairman of the commission.
Did I get, was that in the packet on Monday?
No, it was Monday.
Monday?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I haven't looked at any packet from Monday, so I couldn't tell you if we passed on that. So, my understanding is this, your lease allows you to make a sublease of that with the approval of the commission, and they just gave you the approval to sublease it. If you want, what you're asking for is a complete release, like we've released you, and you're no longer involved, and we have a direct relationship with the new tenant that requires.
You have to read it. It's our attorneys just drew up the document for the city to execute it,
Which would be, it's called a novation, is what you're describing to me. A novation would be a releasing you of your obligations to...
I have to look at it.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying, but I don't think we're willing to do that at this point unless we have a new lease with the tenant. So I don't want to do that. I wouldn't, certainly, I don't make any decisions, so let me clarify that. I would not advise that they release anybody without a new lease in place. So we could forward a new lease to the tenant and then work on an arrangement where we could lease the property directly to the new gentleman and then execute whatever document you feel satisfactory would waive any claim that we may have against you for future rent.
We need to have the commission go to the city accept this assignment in some written form. I don't know what, not that document, how would they know that?
Well, ideally, there would be a written document before the commission that would be voted on and signed, and then it would be marked on the vote that there was a vote today approving the assignment or the sublease of the Bullock hangar is the only way I know. Maybe we should get a plaque for the hangar, and we'll just call it that from now on, to this new tenant. And now that we know that there's been an approval of the subletting of that lease, you can now sublet it to him. If the gentleman wants to have a direct relationship tenancy with the airport commission, we would have to have a new lease. We have 2 leases. They're always hotly debated. But there's a building lease and there is a land lease. We would certainly send that to him with terms in there. And then if he thought that was appropriate, maybe we could do a new agreement with him. And then if we have a new agreement with him, we would be in a position to be able to release you at that time.
So further to this meeting tonight, we're okay to go ahead with
Good to
the
go.
assignment process.
Yes.
Yeah, and we're saying assignment, but I'm understanding it as a sublease, yes. And so that at least gets you in the right direction, and if you want to conclude, if he wants to get a new lease, I think we have a building lease I forwarded you, a building and,
It's just the building lease because we own the building.
yeah, we own the building, so
Yes.
you just change the names,
Right.
change the terms, length of the lease, and he could take a look at that.
Yeah.
Yep, okay.
So I got a question. If he wanted to, Mr. Corley wanted to lease this for 10 or 20 years, would that require an RFP? Or is you're saying he would just require a lease for the additional 6 years that he's giving up?
That's a really good question. I didn't think of that. So do we have to put out an RFP? So one of the things I've been advising is that we have a regular reoccurring RFP occurring every 90 days or so, with it closing every 45 days, because it seems like we've been having a little bit of a drive for business, and if we put that out in connection with that and anybody responds to it, then they're going to be able to look at it. But in the meantime, he would be secure in his sublet lease, at least for 6 years. So if we wanted to take that extra step, and I have been advising this commission to take the extra step of the RFP, because there really is a close group, and there is a close market down here, and so there seems to be a lot of handshake agreements, and so it protects the folks on the commission. That, well, Mr. Foley's a good guy, he's been down at the airport for a long time, so we gave him this lease. So if we notify the general public of an opportunity to lease some property, it really is the best way to go, and I'm really glad you thought of that.
Food for thought.
So why don't we work on that? It very likely won't be a large response. There hasn't been on the last RFP we put out. And if there is, you can gauge whether or not you want to bid aggressively on that or not. And if there isn't, then you're satisfied with your 6-year sublet arrangement.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, I mean, for 6 years to go, so this could be something that's dealt 6 years from now. Now that leaves Mr. Bullock on the hook, but
Although he would like to get out right now. He doesn't want to have any continued commitment, is what he's saying to us.
I don't want to be in a position where I go to airplanes and I make agreements, and a year from now, I'm out. That's where the airport wants to go.
Well, you have, I mean, based on what Peter's telling us, there's 6 years left on the Bullock lease.
Absolutely. There's 6 years,
left
Rich.
that you'll have as a subtenant of Mr. Bullock.
But he can decide, I want out tomorrow, and put the lease up for RFP.
No,
No.
not him.
No?
No.
We could do that, but we wouldn't be able to. We'd have to talk about what the term would be so that somebody bidding on it, there's a current subtenant in there. So it's very difficult. Let me think about it a little bit more. Because he's right, this might be something that's 6 years out. So maybe we'd have a 6-year lease or something like that, so that he could get his relief or novation. I'd have to think about it. I'm just thinking out loud right now. Let me just mull it over a little bit more.
May I ask a question? Mr. Bullock's current lease, I believe, is for 20 years, and he's done 14, and there's still 6 years to go. Is there a caveat within that lease that says that there is another option for another 20-year lease?
No.
So it does end after the 20?
Yes.
Okay. Then it's up to, basically, I would have thought, the commission and Attorney Pusateri to make the decision of whether Mr. Corley, because he's been in there for 6 years, continues with the lease.
Well, so I think what we all know is that he has the right to occupy the property as a subtenant of Mr. Bullock for 6 years.
Right.
For the remainder of Mr. Bullock's lease. The question is, I think the chair raises a very good question to say, should we be thinking about an RFP? And I think we should think about it. But I don't know how we invite the public to bid on something that's already encumbered by a 6-year lease. So maybe we do need a further commitment that says, if we have a satisfactory lease, that he will release himself from the lease, and then the bid process can happen. But then, if that happens, then he's in risk, because someone may come in and offer us $25,000 a month to be in the famous Bullock lease, and Yeah, so there could, so if there is an intersection of problems here, so we'd have to think it through a little bit more.
Okay, so,
They're good to go ahead.
Rich, you're good to, or both Mr. Bullock and Rich Corley are good as far as the physical operations of what's going to happen, right? But we have a problem now where Mr. Bullock wants his name off the lease completely, which is where the rub is.
Right.
Because I noticed there's a lot of insurance information on there too, and who holds that insurance?
Mm-hmm,
So, beyond my pay scale.
yeah.
Mr. Bullock?
I'm a little confused. If we go ahead with the assignment, the end of this week for the 1st of November, that assigns the entire lease to Skyline.
To sublease. So you can sublease it.
It assigns, it's not a sublease, it assigns.
Well, that's why everyone, and I've already addressed this, everyone's saying assignment, but a lease allows for a sublease. It's my understanding. This is a sublease. And maybe I'm wrong, I mean, but my understanding is we're approving your sublease to the new tenant.
The separate language in the existing lease, one deals with subleasing, the other is assignment.
Okay,
The paragraph on assignment specifically assigns this lease to Skyline, so they assume all of the
Responsibilities.
okay. So he has all the insurances that the commission just put in place and everything ready to go?
And that's spelled out in the assignment document that was forwarded to you and you haven't seen, but.
Yeah.
between
I get a lot of emails, though, you know, some of them say urgent, urgent, urgent.
Mr. Bullock is correct, attorney.
Yeah,
It does say assignment. It doesn't say anything about a sublease. It says assignment of that lease.
okay.
And it says that the person who is assuming the lease assumes all the responsibilities
Yes.
spelled out in the lease itself.
Okay.
All the things insurance.
Well, I'll have to look at the records, though, I mean, yeah. So then what we'll do is we'll see this motion as a vote to approve an assignment or a sublease. And if I can see that we can do an assignment, and Mr. Chair, if I'm satisfied with the insurance records are in order, that to the extent that you pointed out, then we'll just do the assignment, okay?
Can we put you on the hook for an answer by next month?
I'll try to do it by the end of this month.
Excellent.
Okay. Are we clear? Yeah. Thank you both for coming.
So we'll hear something by the end of this week.
Yeah. Maybe Monday, right? Is Monday the 31st?
Monday's the first.
Monday's the 1st? Yeah.
Okay.
I can't promise you something by the end of this week. It might be over the weekend that I get a chance to look at it. I might be able to, I'll give you my card, you can give me a call.
But further to this meeting, we have the commission's approval to exercise the assignment.
As I see it written in that, the information that you provided, you are able to assign the lease to someone else. And it's the commission's approval is what is needed. And at this point, that's what you have.
The only thing I would ask is, if I can, is whatever those obligations are for insurance, make sure that's in place. So maybe you can check with the insurance carrier tomorrow. Okay.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you. New business, item 6, moving on to item B, Carlos Silva Events 2022.
Yeah, we've just covered that,
Yeah.
haven't we?
New business, item 6, door for the lobby. Mr. Kettle.
Okay, thank you. I took some photographs of the situation that we currently have with respect to where we would like to see a door, and we need approval from the commission to have that door installed. And there's two positions where it could be installed. One is right within the main lobby, right at the front, leading all the way down to the end of the hall. And the other one is actually just putting it onto the kitchen. And the reason we thought about this is because When there's nobody there, there's still access through the Pilots Association to get into the building. I'm not saying anybody's going to go and steal anything, but there are opportunities there. And there's valuable stuff within the freezer and also on the little side areas where the cabinets are. And, you know, we would like to make that more secure. Now, Commissioner Liberatori brought up a very good point that the ADP, is it called?
AED, yeah, the
Yeah,
defibrillator.
is actually just down the hall, and we can't block that off from the general area. So it appears as though the only recourse we have is to put a door on the kitchen area. And if everybody's happy with that, we would like to get some quotes in and get it done as soon as possible.
Wasn't sure if there was other areas that the pilots needed to get to, you know, because if you shut off the whole hallway, if they needed to get to the meeting areas that we used to be at, you know, then they're shut down. I didn't know how much of access you wanted to prevent people from coming in, but that seems like that streamway of the hallway was pretty valuable to the pilots, and if you want to just control the kitchen area, then just put the door in the kitchen.
Well, you can look at that in two ways. We are a department of the city.
Yeah.
We open at 8 in the morning, we close at 5 at night.
Yeah.
We are all there between 8 and 5.
Yeah, I get that.
And that will be open. So no after hours. We're a department of the city. And that's the way it's always been. So we wouldn't be taking anything away. I just thought that you wanted that AED, you
Yeah.
know, in an area.
Yeah, if the move.
But if we're there all the time, does it matter?
No.
So we could put it on the lobby area.
Yep.
Debbie, would you like to make a comment on that? Okay. Thank you. So you need I guess you need a vote, do you, if we
No,
want to
you're just going to try to get some
get some prices?
prices.
Okay, and then come back to the commission.
And I'm wondering, do we need to, we would need to go to the fire department because they believe there's no door there. So we're going to need approval from
Yeah,
Bill,
that's fine.
sir,
That's
whatever,
fine. We
yeah.
could put a lock on exactly the same as we've got going into my office.
Yeah.
You know, which is just a finger lock.
Yeah.
And they've got that access area, and it would be the same for there. So, but agreed, we'd have to get it approved by the fire department.
Okay.
So we're agreeing on the kitchen.
Kitchen door is what we're going to target. yeah.
Okay.
But we'll get both. We'll get both.
Hallway and kitchen?
Yes.
All right.
So you could choose from one or the other,
Yeah.
depending on the AED and
Right.
the fire department and whatever.
Yeah, because the fire department needs access to the sprinkler system that's off that hallway.
Yeah. Item 7, old business, drone ordinance. Actually, that was probably one of the action items from last month.
So we can address it now then, right?
Okay, yep. Go ahead, Peter.
I was looking through some documents where the chief had sent me a document, but he hadn't included Attorney Pusateri on it. And I actually forwarded that to Attorney Pusateri this morning. May I just read it quickly? Good morning, Vinny. Was checking where we are with the drone ordinance and noted that the chief did not include you on the below mentioned email, so I'm forwarding for you for comments on it, please. A little bit late. I've also copied Drew Mahaley from Master Aeronautics, who is the Director of Operations and Compliance and is heavily involved in drone operations within Massachusetts. Drew, we took the ordinance from the city of Chicopee, Mass. As a guideline for the attorney to develop the ordinance for Fitchburg, which we're also supplying above for your comments and guidance, please. We appreciate the importance of drones in the evaluation of flight, in the evolution of flight and commercial activities, but want to have a safe area around our airport for our pilots and the airplanes they fly in. Your comments are appreciated. So it's really stopped at the moment because of the ordinance that was written, because the chief sent to me, I need answers to all these questions, but you wrote the document, so I forwarded it to you.
Okay. This morning?
Yes,
Okay.
and
I just want to make sure, because I know this is on the agenda. I just want to add that if, Peter, if the airport is interested in filing an ordinance, someone needs to file a petition with the city council, then that person then becomes responsible to shepherd that petition through city
Right.
council. What happens is, if I file something with the city council, my name gets attached to it, and then suddenly, every time the matter gets called in front of city council, they're expecting for me to explain that. Most recently, I was on some airport business, trying to help get things filed with city council, and next thing you know, there are questions about things that I don't, I'm not dealing with these things, so it just is not appropriate for me to be filing things on your behalf with the city council.
no, I
So I
understand.
want the commissioners to know that I've tried to explain this, and I don't know, maybe I haven't explained it well, but the concept is, if Peter's ready to file an ordinance, I've drafted the petition for him. I revised an ordinance, I think you said we got it from Chicopee, is that what you just said? We kind of plagiarized an ordinance from Chicopee. We changed some things stylistically primarily, and a couple other adjustments, I think some good ideas that Peter had. I recrafted that ordinance. I sent that out, and I'm going to just make sure you're aware, in July, and I'm actually in June, and I think again in July, with the request that if we have something that we want to file, we need someone to shepherd that through the city council process. So if there's new questions that came up this morning, I've been in meetings and for most of the day.
No, the questions came up on October the 4th, but they weren't addressed to you.
Oh, okay.
And the chief actually says he has comments to make. Please, can we have some answers? And I assumed it had gone to you.
Okay,
and I
no.
hadn't seen anything.
Yeah, because my assumption is the chief signed off on the ordinance that we drafted over the summer. So I'll have to look at new questions that came in today.
Okay.
What other questions? Are they quick and easy? I mean, what are they?
I believe they're quick and easy.
Let's go through them.
I don't have them here with me, to be honest.
You
so-
sent an email this morning?
Yes. With the attachments. You're doing this now?
Okay.
And I was a little bit indifferent at not understanding, because it's a petition for the chief of police to allow his officers to go out and say, you can't do that here, you can't do that. If you're going to do this, there's going to be a fine. My assumption was that it was the chief that was going to propose it to the city council.
Okay. Peter, I don't see an email from you. I see something about a productions company. I could be missing it, Peter. I'm sorry. I'll have to address it. Here's the drone ordinance one. It's at 11 this morning.
Have you found it? Right.
Yep. Yeah, I don't see any questions from the chief. Is there attachment here?
Yes, there's two attachments.
Okay. I'm going to have to look at this later.
I mean, at the moment, we've only had one occurrence, and that was when somebody flew his drone at the end of 1-4.
Okay.
And the people that call in, they know now that because of what we've done with the drone signs going up in Leominster, Lunenburg and Fitchburg, they know they have to call the airport first to fly. And we have a little book there that identifies who calls in. We know exactly where they are. In fact, on the latest thing that the DPW did, where they did the smoke tests in the city, that was all done to the book. So it's working. It's just that we need to get the ordinance for the police in case something is done wrongly. And like I said, my assumption was that the chief was going to propose that petition to the city council.
Okay.
All right, well, we'll leave that on, we can actually put that into new business if you want for next month's meeting.
Well, we'll leave it on old business, shall we? Just keep on going with it.
All right?
But I could suggest is we could probably address the questions that the chief has. And And then maybe if they're just addressable, we can amend our ordinance and just file a petition.
All right. Item B, land access rental, Leominster DPW. It was my understanding that they were going to bring it to council and vote on this request. Peter, do you know anything about that?
I do. This morning, there was an email sent to Attorney Pusateri with a copy to me that says, "Good morning, Mr. Pusateri. I was just checking back because there wasn't a document attached to the email for me to take and get signed. Will a document be mailed to my attention?"
I'm sorry, what matter are we talking about now?
That's the easement for the DPW in Leominster.
Yeah, so he has that. I did send that to him. I sent it to him again this evening.
Oh, okay,
before he
excellent.
came down.
Excellent, okay.
So basically, he's looking for us to sign the easement, and I'm trying to explain that after Mayor Mazzarella signs the easement, and they get us the check,
Exactly.
then Mayor Di Natale will sign the easement.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay? And
Item C, tie downs, old business, and Peter?
Yeah, I'm still waiting to get a meeting with Bill and Harry from the
Okay.
FBA Co-op, and then once we've done that, we'll address it. They asked a lot of other questions during the first meeting, and just haven't had time to get back to it.
Yep. Stays on the agenda.
Yes, sir.
Item D, request for proposal, 7 to 9 hangars. Just to recap from last month's meeting, the commission sent out an RFP to lease land for development. We only received one response. It did meet the acceptable requirement. However, there was quite a few exceptions. We spoke a little bit about the exceptions, but wanted more time to deliberate, and this is where we're at right now. Mary Delaney gave us an extension of 30 days. So tonight, we need to talk about this proposal and response and see if we can move forward or not move forward. So maybe I can just start with Mr. Kettle. And I see we did get some correspondence from the...
Mr. Shuffles.
Yeah, Mr. Shuffles, I'm sorry, Protector Group?
Approximately 2.5 weeks ago, I contacted Eric and was concerned about just having the 3 exceptions that they wanted to have removed from the land lease agreement. And I asked him about all the others, and he said he didn't have time at that time because he was on business away somewhere. And I reminded him on Friday that the commission meeting's coming up on Wednesday. Has he got it? And he promised it to me this morning, which we got, and I immediately forwarded it to Attorney Pusateri and also the commission chair.
yesterday, right? Not this morning, yesterday. Are we talking about?
Was it yesterday? I beg your
Yes.
pardon.
They all blend into one, Peter, so
Right, yeah, they do, that's
they
true.
do.
That's true. And you've all got copies. I did send it to everybody, but I actually took hard copies and you've got them in front of you.
Yep.
The commission has them
Yep.
this evening, so.
I'd like to start a dialogue with all the commissioners to respond to the response for the request for proposal. Unfortunately, it's not cut and dry. The request for proposal, like I said, was met as far as the dollar amount per square foot. The terms of the lease are extended to a 60-year proposal, which, you know, we do have permission from the FAA to move forward with, as long as it's aviation oriented, and there can be as many as 9 interested parties. One of the big hangups in their proposal is we requested a as-is site, and at last month's meeting, we kind of got hung up on improved site, which in layman's terms means some infrastructure such as water, sewer, gas, electricity in and around where they want to build. It's open to comments from commissioners. Anyone? Beth?
I have a couple of questions. First of all, on the October 25th document, their number 3, where it talks about there needs to be an initial term of 20 years, and then self-exercising options to allow for a total term of 60 years, and then there's no notice from the tenant, so basically, it's a 60-year lease, right?
Mm-hmm. Would you like me to come and sit at the desk to respond to these as questions come up?
Yeah, that's fine. Eric Shuffles, by the way.
Eric Shuffles, I'm the designated representative of this particular group. So a number of these comments, they look somewhat voluminous, but a number of them do revolve around that issue of the term of the lease. In as much as there was a fair amount of discretion to be exercised at the option of the airport that would not afford us the opportunity to have that full 60-year lease. What we're basically asking for here are very common in ground leases, which are effectively self-exercising extensions, and that's what we now have on the fact lease at the airport as that was renegotiated. As the lease was put to us, it says you must, within a window of time, notify the airport of your intention to extend the lease. Should we miss that date and screw up, we would lose the benefit of our lease, and the buildings would revert to the landlord, the airport, and we don't want to have that happen. There's no set of circumstances under which we would not want to extend the lease, so we're simply making it self-executing unless we would otherwise notify you, and that is standard in a ground lease.
I had a question. Counselor, Commissioner, are you done, or do you have more?
Well, yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay. So I'll take it to point 5. There shall be no security deposit nor any building maintenance reserves required at any point during the term of the lease. So my question to you, Mr. Shuffles, is what if you leak jet fuel? Is that...
Excuse me?
If you leak jet fuel, is that our responsibility?
Well, that comes to the indemnity and liabilities and things like that. What we're basically saying is that, you know, we will have built these buildings on our own behalf. You know, you will have obligations, or we will have obligations toward you and liability toward you if things like that were to happen. We have to maintain proper insurances on the properties. We have to indemnify you for certain acts taken by us that you would in fact be protected for.
And if they don't do that, what's going to happen?
We'd be sued, and we'd have the obligations to have you indemnified in that regard. This is a little bit different than a building where you've put up a building or put up improvements in the building for which you need to be assured that we're going to make our payments. If we don't make our payments here, you can foreclose on our interest, and it's going to be a windfall to the airport.
Then jumping down to point 7, permitted use of the space shall comply with FAA mandates only and will not be subject to any additional restrictions imposed now or in the future by the airport authority or by the city of Fitchburg. So for me, that seems like you're only going to answer to the FAA and not abide by any of the rules that the airport puts forth, or am I reading that?
Part of the issue here is a history that goes back some period of time to prior airport administrations where rules were promulgated and about how hangars could be used that were not necessarily in compliance with FAA objectives. And what we don't want to do over a 60-year period is have a varying set of regulations that may restrict our use. We understand and accept the fact that we can't do anything that would put any FAA grant assurances at risk by virtue of our use being in contradiction with FAA restrictions. We don't want to be subject to capricious and arbitrary changes over the course of time in rules and regulations by varying administrations or commissions.
Okay.
Again, to be fair here, this set of concerns was appropriately asked by Peter for us to put forth because we did note in our original proposal that we had exceptions to the lease. They were not fully embodied in our first proposal. This is indicative of what I think the major business terms would be, and it's only fair to you to understand kind of the breadth of what our concerns are. I don't expect you to read through these couple of dozen concerns and simply bob your head up and down and say, these are all fine, but I would expect you to get some sort of acknowledgement from your attorney as to whether these are in principle, generally going to be something that we can negotiate around the basis of, because whatever you come back with here today is going to require a whole lot more flesh on the bone. So what I'd say that you're really looking to do is determine whether this group of participants is worthy of spending more time on to try to figure out whether there's a deal that's able to be made or not.
I agree with you, that statement. Like I said, request for proposal. We only got one offer. It's you. And I think that the commission needs to understand what is at stake here. And at the same time, the solicitor's office needs to give us some feedback as to these items, because just on page 2, I have outlined 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 must. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shall not and will not. So I agree, we need the solicitor's opinion. If this is a no-go today, I think it would be a shame, but the commission needs to know. So Attorney Pusateri, if you could shed some light, or if you even have seen this supplemental information as of yet.
I got it yesterday, and I did take a quick look through it. There's just things that jump out at me that, let me start with this. Mr. Shuffles doesn't think this is a good lease. Mr. Shuffles is a very smart individual, he's a very savvy business gentleman, and he has an opinion that some of the provisions of this lease relate more to buildings than to land leases. I disagree. I've had, the city has had 2 lawyers draft this lease coming out of a continuing legal education form books, and then stylizing it specifically for the airport. The lease has been through at least 3 different tenants' attorneys who've been fairly capable and robust in complaining ad nauseum over various provisions of the lease. The lease has come through, I joke around about this lease, it's been tortured by 1,000 cuts by 10 different lawyers, okay? This is where the lease is. If you're asking me what's my advice, I've given you my final work product in the lease. If you're asking me my advice, the RFP process is frustrated. When you say to a group, cobble yourselves together as one group, and then let's start a bid process then. Because what we've done at that point in time is we've taken any market competition and we've simply destroyed it because now we've created one group. When we say only one person showed interest, I think that overlooks the fact that there's actually 7 people that have shown interest. So we're not getting a robust bidding response because of the way that bid came in, okay? So if I look at the specifics, I think paragraph 2, access to their property is provided for in the current lease. I think they have the right to have access to all the amenities on the airport as the general public would have. I think that doesn't seem to be a deal breaker if they need some clarity on that, but I think they already have that in that lease. Item number 3, I think that it was an error to not only have the market forces kind of working against us as a singular collaborative making a bid for a 60-year lease, because we don't know what the appetite is for shorter-term leases out there. They want to have a provision that's an automatic extension, and we want to have a provision that requires notification to make an extension. I think you're going to see both of those fairly regularly. I think if I was a tenant and I went to a large commercial enterprise that was in the business of making rentals, they would have a lease that would require me to notify them of my intention to renew a lease. I think it's very standard that you have almost an adhesion contract that simply says, here's the lease. If you want to rent from our commercial enterprise, this is what we have. And it does require you to tell us about the renewal. The commencement date to be issued at the final certificate of occupancy for a land lease is simply unacceptable. Having a commencement date at the issuance of an occupancy certificate for a building on a piece of land that you're renting would then tell us, I'm going to rent this piece of land, and if and when I get a certificate of occupancy, we'll begin the 60-year term, and then I'll begin to pay. I just can't imagine that we would ever agree to a provision like that. No security deposit. I don't think I would ever agree to that. No guarantor of a tenancy. I don't think I would agree to that. My advice is that we're seeking guarantors. All tenants on the airport, and indeed all airport users, must comply with the rules and regulations of the Fitchburg Municipal Airport Commission. This tenant should not be an exception. That would be a very poor precedent to set. Making the reciprocal provision regarding a nuisance provision. I mean, the airport is an industrial area. It's in an industrial zone. We have events on it. I think I see another event on the agenda. We're going to use the airport in the manner in which we're currently using it. I think it's unreasonable that the tenant is going to think that we're going to create a nuisance on the airport unless there's a hearing by this commission, but to have an event or something of those effects. If they're having complaints, they certainly can address the commission and deal with that. I think I've gone through 8. How many more do you want me to go through each one? Number 9, complies with the condition of the premises, compels the tenant to accept the premises as is. They've discussed a desire to develop an improved site. That would require a airport manager to request the mayor to instruct the auditor to appropriate funds, to prepare an order to appropriate funds, and it would also involve city council making a vote to appropriate those funds. There are lots of liabilities that are laying around the table that the city council may or may not have to appropriate some funds for, and I would not encourage this commission to go burn up its goodwill on this particular project at this particular time. And I won't say anything more on that. The condition of the premise as is, section 33 deals with an extension options. It also deals with rent for extension terms we've outlined in our previous response. I think Peter was good enough to contact George, and George is okay. When I say George, our FAA advisor and representative, and he was okay removing an obligation to do appraisal, 10-year appraisal, as long as we had some type of rental increase clause in there, such as a CPI.
Correct.
The big problem that I have is the last time we went down this road, I believe there's a CPI in the fact lease that is increasing rent at 50% of the increase of the consumer price index, urban or something. And I had pounded the table on that earlier. I will pound the table on that again. And if it goes to city council, I will pound the table on it at city council this time. Because I just can't imagine that that's in the best interest of the future inhabitants of the city of Fitchburg.
So what are you proposing 100% CPI? Is that what you're saying?
Whatever, when the cost goes up, when the price of everything else goes up, the price of, so doesn't the cost of the rental value, yes. Or we can do the 10-year commercial value of commercial real estate. They may be better off at the 10-year value of commercial, but we need to do something that's tied to reality as events unfold over the next 6 decades.
Can I ask whether we should be responding to Councilor Pusateri's comments as we go along?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, absolutely.
Excuse me?
Yes, you can.
Well, we're 10 down here.
Do you want to go do, because I could take a break for a little while.
Well, I guess the question is, one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that we did this is we don't get off on a foot where we're not going to come to terms on a deal. Councilor Pusateri is adamant that the lease has been accepted by others, and I will tell you that I've been in the business for 40 years and I disagree. I will challenge him to say that those leases that have been looked at on the airport, there's only one ground lease that's been dealt with recently, and that's the one that he and I negotiated in terms of fact. So any other lease that he's talking about...
I didn't negotiate that with you. I negotiated some of that with you. You negotiated the rest of that with the prior airport commission.
Fair enough. My singular point is that any other attorneys who've looked at this recently, who've signed leases with the airport, are for buildings, not for ground. So, the kinds of things to say you should simply accept the lease as it is, I will point you to 12 on my list. Termination for airport purposes. This provision allows the airport at any time to deem the premises are needed for aviation purposes. Should it do so, the lease can be terminated without any compensation to the tenant. This is one of my musts. This section must be eliminated. Which rational party do you think is going to go put $2.5 to $3 million here to simply leave it to the discretion of the airport at their pleasure to terminate the lease? An existing building that you own with a tenant who hasn't put any improvements in it, you may get that tenant to accept this because they don't have anything at stake. Our property rights are at stake here. Half a dozen of these different provisions deal with the confiscatory ability of the airport to take our property without compensation at their option. And if Attorney Pusatari believes that that's current market, then candidly, we're done. We don't have to get past that section. We don't have to talk about 100% of CPI. We can simply talk about the premise that the Airport Commission has the right to take our property without compensation at will. So, Attorney Pusatari, can you defend that premise here that shows up in 3 or 4 different places in the lease and say that that's something that you would do were you sitting in our shoes?
So this provision was reviewed with Peter and our FAA representative in the context of Section 25.1. Section 25.1 specifically does contemplate the fact that the lease can be terminated for airport purposes. And George had recommended, I'm looking at Peter's email, to leave this provision in the lease.
Fine, then
I'm
we can
sorry,
we can save everybody's time here then, because we don't really need to debate whether George from the FAA says that this is okay or not. What we're looking for is a rational party to deal rationally with us in terms of an acknowledgement of our property rights. Attorney Pusatari says that we shouldn't go to the city council to seek money for an improved lot. We said in our proposal that we would be happy to finance those utilities and improvements. If the RFP stands as it is, the rights that we have pursuant to the RFP are to build a hangar that has no electricity, no gas, no water, no sewer, no internet to it. That's what the RFP says. And you wonder why you got one proposal response. The lease says we can take your property whenever we want, we'll give you a piece of land without utilities to it. Nobody would respond to that. Frankly, of the group of people that we have, half of the people said, we shouldn't even respond. This is a ridiculous proposition. And I said, if we want to try to build hangars there, let's put our objections forth to the commission and tell them what it is that we're willing to do. This is what we're trying to do. But I will tell you, we won't proceed on the basis of saying that this is okay with the FAA, that you can take our property at any point in time. We're not going to play that game. So we do need to go one by one by these and understand how you as commissioners feel about the efficacy of our requests. And if you look at it and say, frankly, I don't think it's worth the time, then we acknowledge that and we will go away. To advocate for our proposal, I'll tell you that we have bid a price that is 3 times the price of the current FACT lease. We're trying to add economic development to the airport by bringing in much higher profitability aircraft. We need a partner in that. We don't need someone who's telling us what the FAA tells. The FAA is not going to tell you what to do here. This is the commission that will tell you what to do.
Can I finish my response? Because Eric interrupted me.
Sure.
Thank you. So what would happen is, if we needed the property, the other option would be to engage in what's called eminent domain. If we needed to engage in eminent domain, the initial process, according to the FAAG, the Federal Aviation Acquisition Guide, would require us to contact the property holders and negotiate something with them in good faith, and in fact request that they make a gift of some temporary taking of whatever the limited use the government would need in connection with their property. That's basically, I think, the heart and soul of the provision. And if there is some other way of writing that out that is more acceptable to them, we could look at that. But, these clauses were not dreamed up completely on our own.
In fairness, in response to that, I agree. A government has a right to take anybody's property by eminent domain at any point in time. That's not what this lease says. It says point blank that the Airport Commission, in its sole discretion, can decide it wants to do it, and it specifically prohibits the tenant from seeking compensation for that. That's not at all what Attorney Pusateri is suggesting. It specifically says you can take it without compensation. That's not an eminent domain taking.
That's correct. What we're saying is if we need the property, this area is a place where we would muster if it was an emergency, and if we needed to use it, we need to use it. That's what this is. I mean, the suggestion that the airport's going to come in and just absolutely cancel this lease and then confiscate the personal, well, they wouldn't. Actually, Eric, that's a very good point. If you own the buildings and we took the buildings, we would have to owe them for the buildings. They would have the fair market value of those buildings.
I agree 100%.
The only termination of the tenancy would be the land. So the point is, I mean, if there's a better way of saying that, maybe we need to make it clear so that Eric understands that we're not taking his buildings, but if we need that land, we need that land. I don't know what to say other than that.
Well, I think the point is that that's a substantial departure from what the lease says. Under strictures of government emergency, were the airport to take the land and/or buildings, either temporarily or permanently, they'd have the right to do that under a permanent or partial eminent domain taking. That is not what this lease says. It just doesn't. So if what we're saying is there's an acknowledgement of the property rights and that we need to protect these very remote possibilities, we're certainly willing to talk to that. But there are 3 or 4 places here where it's made very specific that that is not the case.
I will look at that, but I think gentleman's confused between what is his property and what would be our property. Our property would be the land. I think that's what it says we're taking. But I think
The lease explicitly defines what property is, and if you want to change the definition of property, then
maybe that's what we need to do.
That's okay, but it says at the beginning what the definition of it is. We're going off what's in the lease.
Okay.
So,
We will look there, if there's 3 or 4 places, and we can parse out the difference between the land and the buildings, because I think that's where the confusion is.
well, how are you going to take his land if his building's, how are we going to take our land back if his building is on it?
So what we have to do, I think, is conceptually divide, on the one hand, land, and then the structure. So if we think about our assessments from the City of Fitchburg will assess maybe even your house, Mr. Chair, as to the building has a certain value, the land has a certain value, and then they give you a total assessed value. If we did have to step in and take the land here back, it would be an extraordinary circumstance, obviously, because clearly we want the revenue.
Might I?
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
I'm speaking, sir. I'll just finish this one thought, and then you can have the floor. How about that?
Fair enough.
Very good. If in the context of us taking the land, we also confiscated his buildings, or prevented him from using them, or rendered his, I think the term of art is rendered the building an uneconomic remnant, is the actual legal term of art, then they would also have a claim for just compensation on those buildings. So I think it was actually interesting. It didn't really come to me until I was listening to Eric speak about that. So I appreciate your remarks. Thank you.
Let me go to one of the places where this comes up. This is Article 27. Title is Termination for Convenience. And I'm going to read it to you. 25.1, Termination for Convenience. Notwithstanding any other provision of this lease, the landlord reserves the right at any time in its absolute discretion to suspend or terminate this lease in whole or in part for its convenience upon written notice to the landlord. If any portion of this lease so suspended is not recommended by written notice to the landlord with the time period specified in the written notice of suspension, the suspended portion of this lease shall thereupon be deemed terminated, as that portion for the convenience of the landlord in accordance with this provision. Neither the landlord nor the city of Fitchburg shall incur liability by reason of such termination for convenience. The tenant shall have no right to recover damages against the landlord or the city of Fitchburg or their respective officers, attorneys, employees, agents relating to or arising from such termination or suspension under this provision, including but not limited to any and all costs of relocation, lost profits, lost opportunity, or any other direct, indirect, consequential, or incidental loss. I don't know how much more clear it gets as to what that intends to be. Termination for convenience by the airport. This is an emergency. It's not an eminent domain taking, and it specifically states that we cannot seek a dime. When I say that provision must be removed, it is not negotiable. And if Attorney Pusatari believes that I'm reading that wrong, that termination for convenience means something other than that, or that we should in fact be compensated in contradiction to what that says, or if that is in fact a fair market provision, then there's too wide a gap between us, and we're not going to waste our time, period. So I don't try to, I'm trying to read the common verbiage here and not hear what we think it wants to say. I'm only reading what it says, and that's what we're reacting to.
Solicitor Pusateri, could you comment on
Yes.
the implied
Yep.
as opposed to the written?
This was a provision that was reviewed by the FAA, and the FAA, I think we probably got this from them, or to some extent, a previously approved FAA lease. I mean, certainly, I'm not so smart to make up all these clauses off the top of my head. I didn't sit at a word processor and generate this from my gray matter. With that being said, this is a specific point that our airport manager reviewed with the FAA and advised leaving 25.1 in the agreement is the response we got. I don't have a problem trying to parse out, and I've written, actually, even before this, we began discussing, I wrote a note in the margin about an eminent domain issue, whether or not there'd be fair market compensation. So I have a note in the margin on that issue, and I don't mind going back to the FAA on that issue.
So I think in fairness, again, and I don't want to try to be too dogmatic about this, there are 24 points that have varying degrees of importance to us that we've laid out here that in fairness, you need to know what our complaints are. You need to also hear that they're heartfelt on issues like this, and that we're not prepared to simply roll over and say, the FAA said this is what we have to have. Because I can assure you, no rational person anywhere would agree to build property with that kind of a provision. It's not going to exist anywhere else. It won't, period. And it won't with us. We're going to build these things. Some of them will be for our own use, some of them will be for sale. If you saw that provision was in the lease, would you buy it? Would you buy a hangar if you knew that at convenience of the airport commission, they could take it for nothing? It's irrational, and I would argue that many of the other points that we have here reflect that same sort of tenor. And it's simply not fair to say that this is in fact a market lease. It is not. It is, markets are made by two people that are willing to do something. One party is unwilling to accept this lease in its current form without substantial revisions to reflect fairness.
All right. I'm going to make a comment. Looking at this from a bird's eye view, we have 8 to 9 individuals that want to purchase, that want to develop 9 hangars on a piece of property that we manage.
And sell them. I think we just learned, and sell them, right?
What's that?
And sell them? Is that what we just learned?
Yes, it would be a condominium association very similar to FACT that may well have
Develop and sell.
Yes.
transferability, free
Okay.
transferability of condominium interests.
What this does for us at the airport is guarantees us $38,500 a year for that land lease. There's a proposal in there for $6,500 to plow the property. And these individuals want to do this with for 60 years, because their return on investment is going to take 40-plus years, or whatever it comes out to. The $38,500 a year is good, but what the airport is really looking for is the $380,000 additional fuel sales, which is approximately, 1,500 gallons a week. So to me, I want to proceed with this proposal. There are again, a couple dozen musts and shall nots that need to be hashed out, and if that's possible, I'm willing to go to battle for the leaseor. So that's where I stand. Attorney Pusateri.
I would remind you that when we were last negotiating with FACT, they stopped buying fuel because they didn't like what we were doing. So I know you hang in your hat, and I love to see the fuel sales too. I don't know what our margin is, but I know that that's a revenue source for us. And
I don't know that we want to relitigate FACT, but as a matter of fact, the city made the contention that we didn't have a lease at all. They had accepted rent from us for about an 8-year period, had accepted transfer fees for an 8-year period, and we had a letter written to us by the city attorney that said because that lease was not properly approved by the city council, the lease did not exist, and that we were in fact at risk of losing all of our investments in those properties. So we spent about 2.5 years redoing that lease, and that is a historical artifact that is behind us. But some of our responses to this are in fact a response to the process by which we went through to get that lease recast.
Mark, you had a...
Well, I can appreciate the attorney's comments for something that's happened in the past, which I know nothing of. I'm still an interested party that's part of this group, and I'm not too interested in not buying fuel at the airport where my plane is based. So that's my comment to the attorney saying, people not buying fuel. I know nothing of that. I don't even know how that even bears significance right now. But I'm not a party to that, and I don't even understand why that comment was even made.
Point taken.
Did Debbie want to say something?
Mr. Chair, did Debbie have a comment?
Yeah.
I can't see back there. Debbie, go right ahead.
Bring the fuel issue back up again, because obviously we're going to be on both sides of the table, and having been a dinosaur at the airport now for close to 20 years, sadly, here. Fuel for us is a big deal, and I think you guys have an amazing proposal. I am all for bringing development to the airport, and most of the people that are involved in this group are very honorable group of people. Thank you for that. However, when I sit back here and I listen to most of what's being said, what I'm hearing is you need to make guarantees on that. Well, if we've come up with an arbitrary number of how many dollars in fuel sales, can't something possibly be tied to guaranteeing the airport that number of dollars of fuel sales actually comes forth from that? Because I have seen people raise the price of the fuel, and nobody likes that. I can't tell you how many phone calls I field every single week about someone that is 40 miles away that has less of a fuel price. For whatever reason, I know you all like to fly. But I think that there needs to be some sort of negotiation so that we actually do receive the caveat that you're putting out forth us, which is the bigger dollar for us, realistically. And I think you're all very smart people and can possibly make guarantees on both sides. Thanks.
Thank you, Debbie.
I would,
Beth?
thank you. I just,
Can't get an answer to that.
I'm looking at this 60-year term, and then I'm looking at each of these provisions that allow for a termination of the lease for different reasons, and seeing that all of those terminations are requested to be eliminated. It's almost like there's a 60-year term, but there's no, if something should happen that makes this lease impossible for the airport, there's no way for the airport to terminate the lease.
So in fairness, again, under what circumstances would the airport want to terminate the lease? In other words, certainly if we default in payment or we default in some way that we can't cure, the airport can foreclose upon our interests and take them over then. What we're trying to eliminate is the discretionary element of the airport doing it at its pleasure. Hence my, reading verbiage, termination for convenience. That's not national emergency per FAA edict or anything other than termination for convenience. So there are certain other places in there that may require a more nuanced approach to that Attorney Pusatari rightly says, we're going to come to terms on national emergencies, for temporary takings, for eminent domain, and how that'll be done. Frankly, I just finished negotiating with a public agency to build 15 buildings on ground lease land for $1.5 billion project. Mm-hmm. So we understand how these rights work. We're not naive as to this, and we do understand that the protections that a public agency must have in that regard. That's not what's reflected here.
If I could just comment, that you asked why we would terminate a lease. I suppose if you, I know that you're a pilot, I would assume Mark is a pilot. You intend to own faster jet aircraft. And for the next 20 years, you enjoy this hangar, you buy fuel from the airport, and then the next 20 years or 40 years goes to someone else. And they decide to store porta potties in these hangars. That is a issue that would cause us to terminate the lease.
Well, it's an issue that would cause you to enforce use restrictions.
Yes.
And if ultimately those use restrictions were not adhered to, that would result in a default. If that default went through its term and was uncorrected, it would cause you to be able to do that. But there's a process by which you do that. Mm-hmm. What we want to do, again, is one of these issues that say, we want to make sure that we're in compliance with FAA edicts. So when we talk about these provisions, we're not talking about any current airport commission or any current owners, because you're not going to be dealing with us in 10 or 15 or 20 years. It's a myriad of new individuals and a new commission. So we have to protect our rights, and you need to protect your rights in that regard. So we're not speaking to any current administrations, but past administrations have used various rule changes on the airport to try to restrict use in ways that were not consistent with FAA edicts. So what we're not saying to you is, well, we don't intend to do that. Well, I don't know who's going to be here 5 or 10 years from now. We want to know that we're going to have so Attorney Pusatari can say, rightly so, that the city has the right to issue its own set of rules and regulations. We can take a look at those and decide if we like those or not. What we can't have is capricious and arbitrary changes to those that further restrict our use in ways that would impair our ability to quietly enjoy our premises for intended purposes. So some of these have a degree of middle ground where we can meet part way in meeting the legitimate concerns of the commission and ourselves. Some of them, there is no middle ground. Termination for convenience. There's no way to parse that at all, other than simply saying it has to go away. Things like use restrictions, we can talk about that, and we can listen to that. We don't want to be subject to capricious and arbitrary administrative changes over time that impair our use of the premises.
Yeah. Could I ask you about the improved site and your offering to fund the infrastructure with some return? Could you expound on that?
So what I think we're suggesting here is that, again, a hole in the RFP was a lack of recognition about what it takes to make these functional. We're suggesting that we're going to need to bring utilities to the site, and in fact, when they're brought to this particular site, they should be brought in sufficient quantities to be able to allow the further development of subsequent hangars. We don't even yet know where they're going to come from. Peter has suggested, rightly so, that they may come from the other side of the airport, not from the current side. It may be cheaper and easier and better to do that. What we look at that as is a joint undertaking in improving land development. So we'd think of that as a singular project for which we would hire jointly site engineers and consultants to pursue the permits with the Conservation Commission, with the Planning Board, secure whatever easements might be necessary, work with the various utilities, bring utilities to the site and put a transformer there of sufficient size to allow the further development down the line. That's going to cost, I have no idea what. We'll have to, before we figure this out, we need to understand whether it's worth us spending $5,000 more to develop enough in the way of plans to come back and say, we think this is a $300,000 expenditure, or whatever it is. Appreciating the budget constraints of the airport, I can't tell you how much it's going to be. I can't tell you what access to capital that you have, but I can say that we might be willing to consider putting that money into improving that land in return for offsets in some to be agreed upon fashion of our ground rent, and when I say a return on money, an interest expense of an appropriate amount to compensate for time value of money. Those need to be worked out. Hence my saying here today for you, I think the decision to be made here is, are we acting rationally in response to the lease that's been put in front of us? Have we responded to the spirit, if not the letter, of the RFP? Does the financial proposition make fundamental sense to allow us to continue to negotiate over the next month or two in trying to figure out what a deal might look like? And that won't be done in this room by all of these people. It'll be done by smaller groups of people. It'll be done by us hiring an attorney to sit down with Attorney Pusatari. We've done it before. Candidly, despite our words to each other, I know we both have a tremendous amount of respect, and I candidly tell you, we will be through in 1 3-hour session with the meat and potatoes of this lease in a way that we will come to agreement on. I firmly believe that, despite the positions that we've each taken here today. We've done it in the past, we can do it again.
You want to?
And I just, something jumped into my mind. I just want to throw this out, and then, I'm sorry, you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Debbie, go ahead first.
Yeah.
Just as something, because I have been here, this is the first time that I've heard the property would possibly be sold. Looking back at FACT, when the properties were sold individually, the airport commission was receiving a commission on each parcel that was sold. And 7 people or 9 people, we thought these were going to be direct owners, not something sold for profit. And I just wanted to remind you, because maybe all of you have not read that initial FAC lease, when each new owner, because they pre-developed the whole parcel, every time it was sold, the airport received a commission. Food for thought.
That is in fact correct. And part of our consideration in this lease and paying 3 times what PACT paid on a per square foot basis was part of that consideration. So our bid here kind of stands as it is in terms of how we have built our consideration for this. So you could argue that we are not bidding 3 times what FACT did because FACT had a one-time payment in addition to lease payments. You can take a look at that and decide whether it makes sense or not.
Thank you, Deborah and Eric. Attorney
I'm almost
Bustier.
embarrassed to say this, but I was just listening to discussing the potential public-private partnership, and it did trigger in my mind Mary Delaney, our purchasing agent, telling me about any public improvement projects, whether it be building or infrastructure like this. This might wind up being a public improvement project, and there is a rule there that talks about whether or not a building will become a private ownership and whether or not it will be a public ownership. And where the land is different than the building here, there is a potential issue that may also frustrate that. I'm just going to throw that on your radar.
No, it's very possible that what we're doing here violates so many of the principles that were embodied in the original RFP that what we need to do ultimately is figure out what that RFP ought to look like that we're willing to respond to, and or others, to Attorney Pusatari's case. You know, if we had a lease that we could say we will accept this, and if there was a provision in the original RFP that said, here's how we intend to provide these utilities to the site, frankly, we don't have any problem with going back out for a rebid and seeing whether you get more respondents to this too. You know, I've been here at the airport for at least a dozen years. I love the airport. It's my second home. And I think the administration that is here now is the best that I've seen yet in the time that we've been here. It's doing a fabulous job in my mind. I want to see the airport prosper, and I'd like to see it be able to grow in this way. So our heart's in the right place here. But we have to have something that's economically viable where we can actually bring people along that are willing to invest. You know, I'm not willing to invest to build 9 hangars on speculation at the Fitchburg Airport. We do believe we've got a number of interested parties, some of which will be part of a development entity and some of which will acquire finished buildings at the end of the time. But it'll be structured very, very similarly to FACT.
Question.
Sure, Peter, go ahead.
My understanding, listening to everything that's taken place, is that you're not building these hangars for sale. You're building these hangars to use within the 7 to 9 people that want to occupy them. But the bid for sale comes in maybe in 15, 20 years' time. You decide to move on, then that hangar can be sold to somebody else.
I think it's without distinction, Peter, because I can't tell you how it's going to be yet set up. And each of these will have to be freely transferable over the course of time. So right. Frankly, whether we have 4 people and we build 9 and there's 5 of them that are initially held by a development entity to be sold, I don't think it makes any difference. What you need to be concerned about, if I were sitting on your side advising you as we do in our company, we've made representations to you about our financial wherewithal. At some point in time, you got to ask us to stand up and say, who are we dealing with here? Is it you, Eric Sheffels, alone? Is it a to-be-defined development entity, which I've suggested here, that we want to assign our rights to this development entity? You don't know who that is, who it's going to be composed of. Attorney Pusatari will rightly tell you, you got to be a little bit cognizant of this now. That we will define a group of people. They're going to have to satisfy you appropriately as to the financial capabilities and wherewithal to pull this off. And we haven't done that yet. But it's a multi-stage process here by which we can't and won't work to define that group until we understand whether we have the basics of an understanding.
I got one question for you, Eric. Do you think it would be possible if any of these hangars were to come up for sale, would the city have a right for first refusal?
I would tell you if the city wants to engage in an obligation to purchase these on completion, 1 or 2, such that you have them for yourself, we would be more than happy to make a very, very, very low excess compensation deal. In other words, we would almost transfer them to you at cost, assuming what it takes us to get there and if we have to borrow money and that kind of thing. But if part of the consideration here is we want to start acting more like an FBO at an airport that not only sells fuel but also has a place to house planes as they come in, such that Peter and Debbie have some tools at their disposal to service clients, I would encourage you to negotiate a right through Attorney Pusatari to, within a defined period of time, notify us of your intention to acquire one of the completed units under terms to be defined.
So the commission is at a point now where we have to either accept or not accept this RFP. Mary Delaney was...
No, I don't want to interrupt the...
Mary Delaney told me that the 30-day extension was acceptable as long as you were okay with that, and we were okay with that, which we received a letter from her and all agreed to. But we are at the point now where we either up or down. And if I'm wrong...
what's that deadline date?
It's probably within the next 6 or 7 days.
Well, might I suggest something here? Because when you say it's kind of either up or down, if I were Attorney Pusatari, I'd be advising you, up or down on what? You don't yet have a defined deal here. You don't have a counterparty that we've demonstrated to you yet. Might I suggest that we ask Mary Delaney for a 90-day extension, during which time we work to flesh out something that can be brought back to you as a comprehensive proposal that you can then take a look at with the full understanding of what each side wants to do. Now, what that involves then is an agreement on your part to negotiate in good faith over a 3-month period to try to bring some kind of closure to an arrangement like this. We would be willing to do that.
Attorney Pusatari.
Just to stick with my original thinking that we should be in a cycle of our regular reoccurring RFPs, perhaps what we can do is take this input, further input if we want to have a sit down and go through it, recraft a new RFP and issue that new RFP. My initial thought for Mr. Kettle was that every 90 days there's going to be a new one that's going to issue, and which will always be either in an open bid period or within a month and a half away from an open bid period as my concept, so that we could always, in essence, either open for business or imminently open for business on bids for land. We can get those details squared away. We can certainly move closer to where Eric wants us to be. Maybe we can get all the way there, maybe we can't, and then we'll issue a new one. We can advertise it maybe more robustly. Maybe we can stick with the same advertising scheme that we did the last time, however the commission feels, and then responses will come in.
Mayor Di Natale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just spoke with the procurement director, and we can extend 90 days as long as both parties are in agreement. So it's that simple.
Again, we are not, and we're not trying to subvert the competitive process. What we're trying to acknowledge, as I said in the original bid, is you can see the amount of work that goes into trying to do this. No single individual who is not in the business, as I am, of doing this, it's too daunting. there isn't going to be a likelihood of any single individual, nor candidly do you want, nor should you want, to be dealing with 9 separate individuals trying to build 9 separate and distinct hangars. The best case for you is to have multiple bids on a common basis like this. You haven't gotten it because it was too burdensome and too hairy. I'd suggest we can either go out 90 days, as we've suggested, and see if we can come to an agreement, or frankly, let it lapse now, spend 90 days to recraft a new RFP that is an acceptable lease to us, that you could satisfy yourselves, you've got market competitive forces, that anybody else could come out and bid comparably. Probably not, I'll take one, but rather, I'll bid 38,000 square feet worth of space under these terms, and with a better definition of how the site is to be improved and some of the things that we pointed out we thought were deficiencies in the first bid. I'd rather do the former in saying we work 90 days jointly to try to bring something together, but if you feel in your fiduciary duty that you should put it all on a common basis and let the market speak again, that's okay, because we're just going to submit the same thing again. But presumably with the ability to accept the lease as it's proffered at that point.
So to move things along, I am in favor of trying to hash out some sort of a agreement within the next 90 days.
Yeah.
It's going to be a whole lot of work on both parties to go through all that.
It's 2 primary elements that have to take place. One is a lease negotiation, which again, I believe that we can get done with Attorney Pusatari in relatively shorter. Second is actually spending some time and money to better define for you what constitutes, quote, an improved site and how much that might cost. That's going to require the expenditure of some money with the site engineer. If we have this period of time where I'm saying we have, quote, an exclusive right to negotiate of 90 days, we'll spend the money with the site engineer speculatively on our behalf to try to define a range of costs to deliver these improvements to the site. With that, I think you would then have a degree of confidence that Attorney Pusatari would say, yep, there's a lease that we're willing to do, and here's your exposure on these site improvements and how we would propose to have them financed, either through public funds or through private financing on our side. And again, I would encourage you to ask of us the right to acquire a hangar under a preferred basis, because I think it'd be great if the airport owned one.
Attorney Pusatari, would Eric have the exclusive right even for the next 90 days, seeing they were the only bidders?
I don't know the answer to the question off the top of my head. What I am conflicted at this point because I really do believe that it's in the best interest of commissioners to be out in the public with a cleaned RFP that shows the general population, this is what we're now willing to do, through at least the same avenues that you advertised your last one. But then I'm also interested in if he's saying he's willing to spend some money to do a little due diligence. I have one concern about work on public land, whether or not there's a purchasing issue. I'll talk to Mary about that. That's not a big deal. And but I certainly, if we had some independent access to some expert to give us a bid as to how much it's going to cost, it's certainly going to help you. So I think you have to weigh out and make your own decision on, do I want to put this back out into the market, see what market forces bring me with a streamlined, improved offer? Do I want to increase the advertising, make it a little bit more robust to see if I find new eyes to look at my potential project? You put that in the one hand, And do I want the protection of being a very public process, being out in the open, although I don't know how much more public you can have in a posted public meeting, but advertised more widely that you've changed what your requirements are. You'll have more protection there as a commissioner. You can put that on the one hand, and you can weigh that against getting some of that due diligence done on the good faith of the current bidder that you have, and then that's going to be your decision. I mean, if it was me, I think I'm kind of inclined to renewing the RFP, because I do believe what we're going to find is we're back here with the singular group, or maybe the group will grow, but we'll be back with a singular group. I think that's kind of where you're going to be, but
Maybe restating that a little bit in exactly the same way. If we extend the period for 90 days, we'll spend some amount of money to define as best we can what we think site improvements are and what a lease would look like that would be acceptable to us. Alternatively, we could say, look, we understand maybe the RFP wasn't everything it should have been. Let's take another crack at it and do it again. At that case, what I'd recommend that you do is allow us to spend some time with Attorney Pusatari to develop a lease that would likely be acceptable to others, including ourselves, and then go out and spend the money with the site engineer to determine what it's going to take to improve that site so that you can understand what your exposure is going to be, or you can put within the RFP what your expectations are as far as participation in that site improvement work for any bidders, so that there's a higher degree of clarity. In other words, we felt like we had to kind of make up the rules as we responded to this because it wasn't comprehensive. We'd be more than happy to respond to a comprehensive one. The only thing I don't want to see is it come out again with a lease that we'd again cross our arms and say, you know, come on, guys, we don't need to go through this again. So if we have this period of time where it's still open and we can take a shot at that for 90 days, there are some advantages to you, but you'll have to determine whether you're comfortable with that or whether you should hire Gale to spend some money and figure out what it's going to take to bring utilities there and have a contractor look at it and give you an estimate and determine how you would like to see those monies shared.
So I personally am inclined to extend the 90 days. If you're willing to work with Attorney Pusatari on this language, with knowing that it's possible this is going to go out to another RFP. If you understand that, I guess that was my point.
Yeah, to be clear, I'd rather buy a hangar from another developer than have to do this, to be perfectly blunt with you.
Yeah.
I'd rather that the city of Fitchburg were building these hangars and were coming to me and saying, will you sign a purchase and sale agreement to acquire this upon completion?
Yeah.
Believe me, I got better things to do with my life right now than try to do this. I really do. So if somebody else were to come in with a better proposal, well, I'm fine with that, because I'll buy a hangar from them, or I'll rent a hangar from them.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist at the airport today for me to have a hangar that does what I want it to do.
Yeah.
So this is not, candidly, I don't want to try to diminish our interest or say that we're not interested. We are. We've spent time and money to try to do it. But I don't want to waste my time.
Yes.
None of us want to waste our time on a fruitless pursuit. That's why I've tried to kind of incrementally bring people along with our big concerns. And if we can't get resolution on some of these big concerns to our satisfaction, we're not going to hire a site engineer. We're not going to do anything more. We're going to cross our arms and let you go out and try to do it with somebody else.
Yeah.
But I will venture to say there's a reason why nobody else bid it this time. And absent a change in direction, you're not going to be any better off next time. Try it as many times as you want. Not going to happen. There's a unique set of interested individuals here today that are rational in their response and their genuine desire to have a hangar there, but they're not going to do something stupid.
Yeah. Go ahead, Peter.
My understanding after talking to the procurement director is that if the language changes significantly within the land lease agreement, it has to go out for an RFP.
It
Because
would
it's an
not surprise me in
unfavorable-
the least that the number and magnitude of changes here would subject you to a complaint from others who
Exactly.
feel aggrieved. So,
Exactly.
so understand that we would not take exception to the fact that if we end up at a point in time where it has to go back out again, you know, maybe there'll be more responses, that might be fine. By that time, honestly, maybe we won't bid again too. Meaning, depending upon how we've done and how this has progressed, we may or may not be willing to do it. I don't know. I hope we do because I'd like to see it for the benefit of the Fitchburg Airport.
Yeah.
And I don't want to forget, I can't help but put the exclamation point on the FAA improving the approaches to the airport, because that remains a precondition here.
Yes.
So if that doesn't get fixed, they're not going to be built by us or anybody else.
Yeah. Go ahead, Peter.
Tony, just one other thing, just to, for Mr. Attorney Pusateri's knowledge. The reason that I haven't gone out with a rolling RFP is because I don't have the land to go out with an RFP for 90 days. Because the only agreement I have with the FAA is for that piece of land where these 7 to 9 hangars are going. That's why, and the main reason is that we're waiting for the airport master plan. Once the airport master plan is done, then we can do that, because we'll know exactly where the guidance is going to be to do the rest of the business for the airport.
And the restaurant.
And if I might
And the restaurant.
add to that, to Eric's point, it would be very difficult to convince a single hangar to be built if he has to run 1,000 feet of electric and water and sewer and internet and everything else. So,
Do we need water in hangars? Is that like a
Yes.
necessary thing?
Hangars of that size will have to be sprinkled for fire protection.
Franklin?
Yep, for insurance purposes and code purposes, so that becomes a little bit the issue. You need a critical mass in order to make sense of it, and certainly you don't want to have to deal with a whole host of different individuals, if you don't have to.
yeah.
Can I
Is
just
anyone else?
Can I just address one other thing?
Just one other thing.
Yeah, Mr. Sheffels brought up the fact about the Devons, 4102 A and B.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I reminded this person who's going to contact the commander that we needed an answer on whether we're going to get a meeting with them or not. And he came back immediately saying, classification unclassified. Sir, per my discussion with the commander, we ask you to please contact the DAR, Department of the Army Representative, FAA, Eastern Service Center. He's given me an FAA government address, who is the Army liaison for the FAA. Please contact their office to assist you with further inquiries. Thank you for your patience on this matter. And I went straight back to him saying, I will do this tomorrow.
Great.
Okay?
Peter has been extraordinarily diligent. He's received a series of emails from me personally, kind of talking about the specific issues that I've had, and I've drafted them with a mindset that he was in fact going to send them on to understand.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, again, this management team with Debbie and Peter and all of your line personnel are the best it's been in forever. So
Thank you.
extraordinarily responsive.
He is definitely appreciated by all.
All right. Thank you.
I'm going to make a motion to extend this for a 90-day period. And with that, I would expect Attorney Pusateri and Eric Shuffles or a representative to make an appointment to see what they can hash out.
Second the motion?
Vote?
Can I ask, is that with the understanding that if there is significant language changes, that the RFP would then?
It's, it's almost inevitable that there's going to be an additional RFP.
Okay.
Mary said a language change is this, it will.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
And we're reconciled to that without objection, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chairman, I'm sorry, I've got a question.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, the 90 days, is that an additional 60 because we've already had 30, or is it another 90 days?
We basically, if both parties agree, we can extend it for a year.
Ah, okay.
I mean, it's,
Yeah, that's
according to
fine.
Mary,
Thank
it's unrestricted.
I think what I'd like to say is that, you know, it's going to take some amount of time. Candidly, we're going into the holidays now. I'd like to, let's do it the date certain. Let's do it the end of January. Let's extend the period to the end of January.
November, December, January. Yeah, 90 days.
I have a question for Solicitor Pusateri. You have experience working with Mr. Shuttles. Are you sure, excuse me, Shuffles. I apologize, sir.
Okay.
Are you confident that we can come to some sort of midway point?
Well, now he's resorted to complimenting me. I have a higher degree.
Because the last thing I want to do is prolong the inevitable, and we're back.
Let's sit down, let's go through it. I think that the points about the fair compensation, the separation clearly of the land from the building being theirs, and them entitled to fair compensation has to be explored and flushed out.
Okay.
And I think that's the major impediment at this juncture. But
It will be for a subsequent RFP. So frankly, what you'll learn from this is what the bidding community will be looking for. You can decide whether you're going to accept the provisions or not. You're going to choose to put out the RFP however you choose to put out it next time around. The only thing you'll know is if we don't come to agreement and you put it out the next time around, we may or may not respond. Meaning that if we've taken our best shot at it, and Attorney Pusateri comes back and tells you, look, I got to be honest with you guys, it's my professional judgment that we've gone as far as we can go, despite the fact that this is what they want. I will let him and you know whether we will bid to that or not. And then you can decide how you want to go from there or not.
So I believe the motion's still on the table, Mr.
There
Chairman?
is a motion on the table to extend this, well, for 90 days, but I'm assuming we can extend this for 120 days as well. But January is included in 90-day or not?
Yes.
Yep.
It is?
End of January, yeah.
Okay. So let's stick with the 90-day extension, and I motion to do so, and
Richie seconded.
I think Richard seconded it, so let's vote. I vote to extend.
Aye.
Based on both parties willing to come to the table, yes.
Yes.
Eric, thank you very much for
Thank you for your
trekking out here,
consideration.
appreciate it.
You bet.
Mark as well. All right, we're not to the end yet.
16 agenda items still to go, so.
I know.
No, there's 6.
Okay, item E, hangar 10, new door.
Yeah, as you know, we managed to get a manufacturer of a door out of New England and
Hold tight.
New
right?
Hampshire, sorry.
Hold
And
tight.
yeah,
Yep.
and they gave us a quote. The quote was accepted, and they came in and they started to talk to us about the actual hangar itself. And I walked out with the guy that's actually doing this. He's a professional engineer, and I asked a load of questions because I'm just a simple mechanical engineer, not a civil engineer, and I wasn't happy with the answers. So at the last meeting that we had with him, they've agreed to involve a civil engineer, and this civil engineer is going to cost us $2,000, but that civil engineer is going to give us a stamped, approved drawing that says that this door will work and not affect the structural integrity of the hangar. And that meeting is next Monday. So that's where we are with the new hangar door. The hangar door itself weighs 1.5 tons, and it's being lifted up by hydraulics. And this is going on to the Nagel hangar.
Okay.
So that's an update on the door.
Okay. Thank you. Item F, Brazil Summer Festival.
Yeah, the summer festival went very, very well. There was just over 9,000 people there. We got an additional $3,000, so we managed to get $13,000 for that event. And the three events have culminated in approximately $47,000 for the airport. So that went well.
All right. Item G, doors for hangar 2 and 3.
We await MassDOT, and that usually comes out around about the end of December, whether they're going to give us an ASMP grant for those doors.
Yeah.
So that's going ahead still.
Roofs for hangar 12 and 13, item H.
We had the contractor out. He sealed both hangars, or he thought he sealed both hangars. And we went in there yesterday afternoon, and there's just two small leaks where it used to be like a rainforest. And I sent an email today out to the consultant, and hopefully they'll be back within the next couple of weeks to repair them completely.
David, please make sure you put an action item on item H for the follow-up for the leaks.
Yep.
Please. Item I, crew car.
Yeah, the information that I got was a little bit incorrect. I was talking to the airport managers, and they did have crew cars, but the crew cars aren't owned by the city. They're owned by the FBO. So that changes things completely.
Why?
Because the FBO does what he wants, because it's his car. Whereas the city owns it, and it's a public vehicle. And the problem is getting insurance, according to Attorney Pusateri, for people to drive a public vehicle.
I thought the vehicle was insured by whoever's driving it. Their insurance.
It is, but yes, it is. That was the proposal that I made to the city, if you remember. But Attorney Pusateri wanted documents to actually put out to get the person to sign when they take that car. And he asked me to find out if I could get that detail, but I can't. So we've got to come up with it somehow.
Vinny? Vin? Crew car? What legalese are you casting about on this one?
It's the other solicitor for the city, Solicitor Calvin Brooks. Did you see the email? Somebody referred to him as, or he signed off Solicitor Brooks.
I did.
So it's not simply the driver of the vehicle that has a driver's license and is insured. It does not simply carry over to the crew car?
There were two issues that Attorney Brooks brought up to our, Solicitor Brooks brought to our attention. One was insurability, and I think Peter addressed that already because we don't own the car. It's been provided to us from a nonprofit.
No. This is the car that the mayor got for us. It's owned by the city.
Owned by the city?
Yes.
So the issue was the insurability of that, and I think we cleared that issue.
We did and we didn't.
We did. I think we did clear the issue with Bill McPhee from representing our...
He said we're all covered.
We said we're covered.
Yes.
Calvin brought up a second issue about private individuals, whether they're the pilots, whether they're owners of the planes, or using public property. I have not resolved that issue yet. I can't imagine that it's an impediment.
I was trying to find out, if you remember, from the other airports that were city-owned, if they had crew cars and what they did. Well, they did tell me they had crew cars, but they're owned by the FBO.
They're owned by
the city, so I can't help.
That wasn't a result, yeah.
Can't help.
So that's the issue that I have, and...
So what would simplify it? If the airport owned it?
No, would
You
simplify
can't, it's
it...
still the city.
It's still city.
Right.
Still city.
What would simplify it is, perhaps if there was some nonprofit that owned it and that just left it there at the airport for use. I mean, that's, right? Some other entity other than the city, because it's not government property being put to some personal private use. Because the problem is we don't charge a fair market value for the use of it. It's a courtesy car. And I haven't thought my way around that one there.
Isn't there any way, Attorney Pusateri, that, like the suggestion, that the person that drives the car puts it on his insurance? Yeah.
So there's two issues, right? So we talked about the insurance. I think we've already cleared there have been a number of emails about this. And my memory's pretty clear that you and I and William McPhee from NAPSTANK, our insurance agency, has cleared the insurance issue, okay?
Yep, they said it's fine.
The second issue is there a problem when you allow a private person to use for their sole benefit the government property? And I tried to suggest, and I haven't thought my way through that yet. I mean, I can tell you, I will try to think my way through that, but that's where we are. And the objection came from the auditor's office.
Right. Okay, so next meeting.
That's where we are.
Yeah. We'll leave it
You
on
know
the
what,
agenda.
we should just lay eyes on that email from Bill McPhee, but that email is there. That issue's cleared. There's only one issue that's left outstanding.
Yep.
Okay.
Item J, minimum standards, target by the end of the year. It's going to be November soon.
Well, as you can guess, I've done absolutely nothing on it because I've just been too busy.
Yeah.
Both Debbie and myself, we're just too busy.
Imagine if you had a law department to run, too.
Excuse me?
You have a hall pass on that, Peter.
Sorry.
I said, imagine if you had the law department to run, too.
I'm going to add an item, item K, a manager's update.
Yeah, actually, Matt Caron from Gale actually brought it up. This is the actual annual conference of the Massachusetts Airport Management Association. And if you open it, you can pass it around.
The agenda's resolved.
You have a nice night.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night. Good night. Thank you.
Very nice.
We hosted the MAMA conference, and there was over 120 people there, and the mayor got a nickname of the Bulldog.
How did that happen?
He opened up the actual session, and everybody was so impressed. And then I did a 35-minute presentation on the airport, and
Similar to
they
the
actually...
chamber?
Sorry? Similar, but nowhere near the same, because a different audience and everything.
Right.
And they said, the actual MAMA director and the chairman came up and said, you and the mayor should go on the road. So it went really, really well. Everybody was happy. It was a great event. It really was, and it put Fitchburg on the map.
Well, that's good. Even the participation of 120 people is very, very good.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, can I just ask all of you for some help?
Sure.
I've just done 2 appraisals about a month ago, and I forwarded them back to the HR department, and I made recommendations that we change the status of 2 people on the airport. One of them is Terry Parker, who's been there for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. He's called a senior lineman, but he's not a senior lineman. He's on the same pay scale as the other guy that we've just employed. And I would like to officially get him called the senior lineman. And I put this to HR on the recommendations, on the appraisal. Mm-hmm. The other one is that young lady over there. I'd like her to get the name back of assistant airport manager. And I need some help from you guys to get it to happen.
Okay.
Please.
I thought Deb's situation was already taken care of.
No, I've done all the paperwork and I've made the recommendations, but nothing.
Does that fall under financial review, Mr. Chair? Does that have to take a vote on that?
No.
I don't think it does, because...
What he's asking for is probably a letter or a signature on a pre-written letter or request.
That'd be good.
Whatever.
Can we submit a letter to Sue Davis from the commission saying this is a request from us?
I think it should go to the mayor and let the mayor put it down to HR.
We'll submit it to the mayor then,
You know?
Whatever's the easiest, yeah.
from the commission.
You know, I've never been so more serious about it, so...
We adjourn?
Rich, could you take lead on that? Just
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
keep us posted.
Okay, I'll talk to him.
Yeah. Item F, financial review.
I signed the
All
Novembers.
is well?
I signed the Novembers.
Yeah.
That's all done. You didn't hear that, Debbie, because you were talking to the mayor. I have asked for a letter to go from the commission to the mayor and then down to HR about your status becoming the assistant airport manager.
Yeah, and Terry would be the Senior line.
Senior lineman, yes.
Yep, I'll take care of that.
An outrage that you aren't already. Said it's an outrage you aren't already.
Item G is executive session, none at this time. That needs to be known prior to the commission meetings anywho, but none tonight. Date and time of next regular meeting, November 24th, 2021, at 6 PM, Legislative Building.
Is that the night before Thanksgiving?
Is that the night before Thanksgiving?
It is.
Yes.
Well, what do you want to do?
So we need to change, we customarily change that.
You want to make it the 17th? The week before?
How about we just
Yeah.
take a break?
I'm available.
What'd you say, Dave?
It's,
Take a break in
Wednesday,
November.
the 17th.
November 17th? Okay.
Let me check my busy schedule.
You're retired.
I know. 17, I'm open.
Oh, good.
Retiring.
Okay, well, that's going to be a definite.
David, you could be available on that day?
I have to check my schedule. Am I checking right now? Is that what you want? I don't know. Let me see.
All right, so pencil in, please, November 17th, 2021, 6 PM here. If that changes, we'll certainly let City Hall know, and they can,
I do have a prior obligation, Mr. Chair, but I don't think it will venture into 6 o'clock.
yep,
I think we'll be okay.
Actually, I think you should put a caveat on that. It should be us that's asking the City Hall if this is available on the 17th.
oh, that's right.
Point.
Right.
Space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll take care of that. Okay?
commissioners, please watch your emails.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Regular meeting adjourned at
8:30.
8:30.
8:30.
Can I get a motion in a second?
Motion.
Second.
Bingo. Time to go home and eat.